What if Ahsoka becomes the Emperor's apprentice instead of Anakin? The chamber was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the grand window overlooking Coruscant's sprawling cityscape. Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano stood before Chancellor Palpatine, summoned for a private audience. Ahsoka wasn't sure why she felt uneasy. She had been in this office many times before. Yet, something about this moment felt different. Palpatine's piercing gaze lingered on her for a beat too long. Then, with a practiced smile, he addressed them. "My dear friends," he said smoothly, "the war has reached a critical juncture. The time has come to explore alternatives to endless bloodshed." Ahsoka and Anakin exchanged a glance. "Alternatives?" Anakin questioned. Palpatine nodded. "Peace negotiations?" Ahsoka's brow furrowed. "With the Separatists?" Palpatine clasped his hands behind his back, stepping toward the large window. "Indeed," he murmured. "There are those among them who wish to end this war as much as we do." Anakin folded his arms, skeptical. "You really think Dooku's council will listen?" Palpatine chuckled. "One of them already has." Ahsoka tilted her head. "Who?" Palpatine turned to face them. "I'm afraid I cannot disclose that information," he said. "But I can tell you this. I require the two of you to accompany me for security. You are the greatest warriors the Republic has. Who better to ensure my safety?" Anakin nodded. "Of course, Chancellor." Ahsoka nodded as well. Palpatine smiled, but then his gaze shifted to her once more, and his expression changed. For the first time, it was not the mask of a kind and wise leader. It was something else. Something calculating. Ahsoka felt a shiver down her spine, and then, without her knowing, he reached out through the Force. It was subtle, a whisper against her presence. He could feel a pulse of pure light coursing through her veins, vast, powerful, divine. But beneath it was something else. A raging, writhing storm of darkness, buried deep, struggling to break free. Palpatine's eyes narrowed slightly. Fascinating. Unbeknownst to both of them, the sun's corruption still lingered within her. The darkness had not left her. No, she had merely been fighting it all this time, and fighting it alone. He could feel the power of the lingering darkness. A slow smile curled on Palpatine's lips. This changed everything. They departed Coruscant that evening, aboard a sleek diplomatic cruiser. The destination was a neutral world, an abandoned separatist outpost on Ord Vellum, where a high-ranking official had agreed to meet. The journey was quiet. Ahsoka sat alone in her quarters, feeling off. Had she imagined it? No. Something was wrong. But what? The ship landed in the vast ruins of the outpost. Ahsoka and Anakin flanked Palpatine as they moved forward, wary of any betrayal. The wind howled through the wreckage. It was eerily silent. Then, blast of fire erupted from the cliffs. Ambush! Anakin ignited his saber instantly, deflecting bolts as battle droids emerged from the ruins. "Stay with the Chancellor," he shouted. Ahsoka nodded, stepping in front of Palpatine as Anakin charged into battle. The moment he was gone, Palpatine moved. Ahsoka barely had time to react as something struck her from behind. She collapsed to her knees, dazed. A metallic canister clattered to the ground before her, hissing as a thick purple mist poured out. She coughed, trying to move, but her limbs felt heavy. Her vision blurred. The force inside her twisted. Darkness, pure, unfiltered darkness seeped into her veins, burning her from the inside out. She gasped, clutching her head as pain racked her entire being. She heard Palpatine's voice, low, calm, commanding. "Do not resist." Ahsoka's breath hitched. She could feel it now, the dark side swelling within her. She could remember what she had been forced to forget. It was him. The son of Mortis had infected her all that time ago. And now, Palpatine had awakened it. "No," she choked out, trembling. Palpatine knelt beside her, watching with a smirk. "Ah, my dear. The darkness is not your enemy." She squeezed her eyes shut. She could feel it consuming her. The cold, suffocating power. Palpatine leaned closer, whispering, "You have always been powerful, Ahsoka. But you have been limited by Jedi lies." Her hands clawed at the ground. The pain was unbearable. The light inside her struggled, desperate to fight back. But it was losing. The dark side swarmed over it, drowning it out. Her fingers dug into the dirt. And then, her breathing slowed. She lifted her head, and her eyes turned yellow. Palpatine grinned. "Rise, my apprentice." Ahsoka stood, and she was not Ahsoka Tano anymore. Anakin rushed back toward the landing site, lightsaber still ignited. "Chancellor, Ahsoka." As he emerged onto the plateau, he froze. Ahsoka stood before Palpatine. Her posture was different. Her presence was different. Anakin's stomach dropped. "Ahsoka." She turned to him. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and she smiled. Anakin staggered back. No, no, this couldn't be happening. Palpatine gestured forward. "Kill him." Ahsoka's twin sabers ignited, and she lunged. Anakin barely had time to block. Their blades clashed, sending sparks flying into the air. Anakin's mind was reeling. This wasn't just some Sith technique. It wasn't mind control. It was her. Something had broken inside her. Something had changed. And for the first time in his life, Anakin Skywalker felt fear. Anakin gritted his teeth as Ahsoka's sabers bore down on him. Her strikes were relentless, fast, unpredictable, a brutal storm of offense that pushed him back with each blow. This wasn't the same Ahsoka he had trained. She had always been aggressive, but her movements had balance, restraint. Now, there was only rage. Her golden eyes burned with something ancient, something terrifying. Anakin barely managed to parry a vicious downward slash, the impact rattling his bones. "Ahsoka! Stop this!" She didn't answer. She just kept attacking. Her speed was overwhelming, her strength unnatural. Anakin was the strongest Jedi alive. Only Obi-Wan or Yoda could rival him in pure skill. But this Ahsoka, she fought like a demon, like she had tapped into something beyond even the Sith. From the side, Palpatine observed with satisfaction. The experiment had been a success. The son's influence had been dormant within Ahsoka for years. A rare gift, a vessel of both light and dark, so much potential wasted on the Jedi. And now, she was his new apprentice, his chosen one. Palpatine's gaze flickered to Anakin. He had once intended to mold Skywalker into the Sith's future, but Anakin was a Jedi through and through, despite his anger, despite his emotions. Ahsoka, however, she had already walked away from the Order once. She had already tasted exile. She was the perfect apprentice, and after today, she would never look back. Anakin's boots slid backward in the dirt as Ahsoka unleashed a furious combo, driving him toward the edge of the plateau. His mind was racing. How did this happen? What had Palpatine done to her? She had fallen into the dark once before, on Mortis. But they had saved her. She had been saved. Listen to me, Anakin shouted, blocking another powerful overhead strike. Ahsoka, you don't have to do this. She snarled, pressing harder. Her strength was unreal. Anakin had never struggled against her before. But now, he was losing ground. Her eyes flashed, her lips curling into a cold smirk. You are weak. Anakin's stomach dropped. Those weren't her words. That was the son's voice. A chill ran through him. This wasn't just Ahsoka. It was something else. Something older. Something wrong. And it had consumed her. Ahsoka feinted left, then spun into a brutal reverse stab aimed at his gut. Anakin barely twisted away in time, feeling the heat of her red blade graze his tunic. She was too fast, too strong. She had never been able to outmatch him before. But now, he was fighting for his life. Anakin steeled himself. If he wanted to save her, if he wanted to bring his Ahsoka back, he needed to stop holding back. He needed to end this. Summoning the full power of the Force, Anakin slammed his palm forward. A massive shockwave erupted between them, hurling Ahsoka backward. She skidded across the ground, flipping onto her feet effortlessly. But for just a moment, her expression flickered. Something in her eyes shifted, and Anakin saw it. A brief glimpse of recognition, of fear, of Ahsoka. His heart clenched. There was still light in her. It was buried, drowning beneath the darkness, but it was still there. He had to save her. He had to. Palpatine stepped forward. That is enough. Ahsoka's golden gaze snapped toward him. The Emperor's lips curled into a smile. Kill him. Ahsoka hesitated. Just for a second. And that second was everything. Anakin seized the moment, reaching deep into the Force, and with one final push, he blasted her backward with all his might. Ahsoka slammed into the ruins behind her, her head hitting stone. And then, silence. Her sabers clattered to the ground. She didn't move. Anakin's breath came ragged. His hands were shaking. Palpatine's expression darkened. But he said nothing. Then, without another word, the Sith Lord turned and strode back toward the ship. Anakin staggered forward, his heart pounding. He dropped to his knees beside Ahsoka's motionless form, pressing his fingers to her throat. A pulse. She was alive, but unconscious. She needed help. He needed to. Pain exploded through his body. Anakin gasped, collapsing as lightning surged through him. Palpatine stood above him, hand raised. The Sith Lord's voice was deathly calm. You disappoint me, Anakin. Anakin's screams echoed into the night. Palpatine's shuttle lifted off. Ahsoka lay still within the ship's medical chamber, unconscious. Palpatine sat in his throne, watching the stars blur past the viewport. He activated his comlink. Execute Order 66. Ahsoka's eyes snapped open. The sky above Coruscant burned. The Jedi Temple, once the shining heart of the Order, was now a battlefield. Fire and smoke choked the air as clone troopers stormed the halls, blaster fire lighting up the darkness. And at the forefront of the slaughter, Ahsoka Tano. She moved through the temple like a shadow, her twin blades cutting through Jedi and younglings alike. The daughter's power still lingered within her, but it was buried beneath the overwhelming darkness of the sun and Palpatine's alchemy. The Ahsoka who had once stood for justice, for hope. was gone. In her place was a weapon of the Sith. Ahsoka's lightsabers hummed as she stalked through the temple halls, her golden eyes scanning for survivors. Clone troopers marched behind her, executing any remaining Jedi they found. Her enhanced senses could feel them. Fear, desperation, weakness. She had once been one of them, but now they were prey. Ahead, a group of Jedi Knights stood in formation, their sabers igniting in defiance. Shock T led them, her blue blade casting a glow across the ruined corridor. "Ahsoka." Her voice was firm, unwavering. "I don't know what this Sith Lord has done to you, but you can fight this." Ahsoka tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, she lunged. Shock T barely raised her blade in time. Ahsoka struck like a storm, her twin sabers a blur of light and death. Shock T was a master, one of the finest duelists in the Order. But Ahsoka, she was something else. The sun's dark influence had amplified her speed, her strength, her rage. The other Jedi Knights rushed forward to aid their master, and Ahsoka cut them down. One by one, they fell. She was unstoppable. Finally, it was just her and Shock T. The Togruta Jedi Master breathed heavily, her stance steady but faltering. Ahsoka twirled her sabers, the hum of her blades filling the silence. "Are you afraid?" she whispered. Shock T's eyes narrowed. "Not for myself," she said. "For you." Ahsoka snarled and attacked. In the lower levels of the temple, Mace Windu stood with a small band of Jedi. The clones had overrun most of the temple, and the dark presence leading them was unstoppable. Windu had fought many Sith in his time, Dooku, Sidious, and lesser Darksiders. But this was something different. Ahsoka's power was unnatural, and it was only getting stronger. The temple was lost. They had one chance: escape. The remaining Jedi had to scatter. If even a handful survived, the Jedi could live on. But first, he had to confront Ahsoka. Mace Windu met Ahsoka in the temple's central chamber. The great statues of Jedi past loomed over them, casting long shadows in the firelight. Ahsoka stood at the center, her red sabers igniting in the darkness. Windu ignited his purple blade. He studied her, his sharp gaze unwavering. "This is your last chance, Ahsoka." His voice was calm, but firm. "Step away from this path." Ahsoka smiled. "A cold, cruel thing. I'm not afraid of you." Windu nodded once. Then, he attacked. Their sabers clashed with a deafening crack, the shockwave shattering the stone beneath them. Windu fought with Vopad, the unpredictable, ferocious lightsaber form that had allowed him to turn one's dark side energy back onto themselves. Ahsoka fought with pure instinct, enhanced by the unnatural power of the sun. Their blades became a blur, strikes coming faster than the eye could follow. Windu's movements were precise, controlled, channeling Ahsoka's darkness against her. But Ahsoka was relentless. She struck with rage, her speed forcing Windu onto the defensive. Then, she feinted left, forcing Windu to counter. And with inhuman speed, she twisted. Her blade slashed across his side. Windu staggered, clutching his wound. Ahsoka grinned. But before she could strike again, an explosion rocked the temple. She turned, eyes narrowing. A ship was landing outside, and she could feel it. Anakin Skywalker was here. Anakin Skywalker stepped off the ship, his blue saber igniting. Beside him, Obi-Wan Kenobi's saber ignited as well. They had come for her, for their friend, for the Jedi, for the galaxy. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ruins of the Jedi Temple smoldered, fire casting twisted shadows against the stone pillars. Anakin and Obi-Wan stood at the temple entrance, their lightsabers humming. Ahead of them, Ahsoka Tano. Her golden eyes burned with unnatural fire, and her twin sabers crackled in the darkness. She was no longer the Padawan they once knew, no longer their friend. She was the Emperor's wrath, and she was waiting for them. Anakin stepped forward, his blue saber held firm. He searched Ahsoka's face for any sign of the girl he once trained, but all he saw was rage. "Ahsoka," he said, "stop this." Ahsoka tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand, Master," she whispered. "I see clearly now." Obi-Wan's voice was steady. "Ahsoka, listen to yourself. This isn't you." Ahsoka laughed. A cold, bitter sound. "You still think you can save me?" Her grip on her sabers tightened. "You're too late." Anakin's jaw clenched. "Then I guess we'll have to stop you." Her smile faded. Then she attacked. Ahsoka lunged, her sabers a blur of red light. Anakin parried, stepping back as her strikes came like a storm. Obi-Wan moved to flank, but Ahsoka spun, her second saber slashing toward his throat. Obi-Wan barely dodged, forced on the defensive. Her speed was unreal, faster than Anakin remembered. Anakin clenched his jaw. He had to end this, fast. He feinted high, then dropped low, sweeping his saber toward her legs. Ahsoka leapt, twisting midair, bringing both sabers crashing down toward him. Anakin caught them on his blade. The impact shook the ground. Obi-Wan used the opening. He slashed toward her exposed side. Ahsoka saw it. Too late. Obi-Wan's saber grazed her arm, searing through her shoulder. She hissed in pain, and unleashed a force wave. Anakin and Obi-Wan were blasted backward, slamming into the temple pillars. Ahsoka panted, cradling her wounded arm. Her eyes burned with hatred. And then she laughed. "You're holding back." Her voice was laced with venom. "Afraid to kill me?" Anakin's breath was heavy. "Ahsoka," he said, voice strained. "We don't have to do this." Her grip tightened on her sabers. "Yes, we do." Then she charged. Their blades clashed again, the temple walls trembling with each impact. Obi-Wan saw it first. Anakin was slowing down, not because he was tired, because he was hesitating, because this was Ahsoka, and she was going to kill him for it. Ahsoka twisted, her saber slashing across his chest. Anakin barely blocked in time. Obi-Wan moved in, striking high, forcing her back. But she was relentless. Her rage fueled her, the darkness empowering her movements. And then she saw an opening. Ahsoka feinted right, then dropped low, kicking Anakin's legs out from under him. He hit the ground, and she was on him. Her saber descended, aiming for his heart. Anakin threw up his hands, and caught the blade in the force. For the first time in the fight, Ahsoka hesitated. Anakin's blue eyes blazed with power, raw, unrestrained. The Force itself answered him, pushing back against the sun's darkness within her. Ahsoka gasped, her body trembling. Anakin stood. His presence in the Force was blinding, like a sun burning away the shadows. And for the first time, Ahsoka felt fear. "Ahsoka," Anakin's voice was calm, but firm. "I know you're in there." Her golden eyes flickered. The darkness wavered, just for a second, and then Ahsoka screamed. Her sabers fell from her hands, her body convulsing as the darkness inside her fought back. Anakin stepped forward and placed his hand on her forehead. A surge of light exploded from him, and the darkness shattered. Ahsoka's body collapsed. Her eyes, once burning with hate, were blue again. Anakin knelt beside her. "She's okay," he said, breathless. Obi-Wan sighed in relief. But the battle wasn't over. "Not yet." "Come on," Anakin said. "Yoda needs our help." In the Senate chamber, Grand Master Yoda battled the Dark Lord of the Sith. Lightning crackled through the air as Yoda leapt between the Senate pods, dodging Sidious attacks. The Sith Lord laughed, his face twisted with delight. "You cannot defeat me, Master Jedi." Yoda gritted his teeth. "Defeat you, I must." He spun his green saber, deflecting another surge of lightning. And then, Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived. Sidious' eyes narrowed. "Skywalker," he sneered. "So the Jedi sent you to die as well?" Anakin stepped forward, his blue blade igniting. "You made a mistake, Chancellor." Sidious chuckled. "And what mistake was that?" Anakin's expression was calm. "You chose my Padawan." Then they attacked. 3 Jedi, 1 Sith. The battle that would decide the future of the galaxy began. Sidious struck first, unleashing a torrent of Force lightning. Anakin blocked, channeling the energy with the Force. Obi-Wan flanked, his blue blade slashing. Yoda leapt, spinning through the air, striking from above. Sidious was fast, but he was outnumbered. For the first time in his long rule, Sidious was on the defensive. Blades clashed, lightning surged. The room shook under the power of the duel. And finally, Anakin saw his chance. Sidious overextended. Just for a moment, Anakin lunged. His blue saber pierced the Sith Lord's chest. Sidious' eyes widened. He gasped and collapsed. It was over. The Sith were defeated. The galaxy would change forever. But the war wasn't finished yet. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.